When I was young and good-looking, well, at least in my own eyes, I went to 4 brothels in one night. I didn't get any sex, but I got a cup of tea and an iced Vovo biscuit. In 1975, prostitution was against the law in Australia, yet that didn't stop the world's oldest profession, and everyone knew that the place to find it was at King's Cross, the red light suburb of Sydney. At 18, I spent each Saturday night at the Cross. I went with a small group of Christians. Our aim was to tell the people the good news about Jesus. I would spend most of my time walking around the streets of the Cross. Walking down Darlinghurst Road, from the big Coca-Cola sign to the El Alamein fountain, I would often get approached by up to 4 street girls asking, "Hey, do you want a girl?" They weren't interested in talking about Jesus, however. Time was money. "If you're not paying, move on. So my time was usually spent with the tourists, the sightseers, the gays, bikies and drug addicts. Alec and Nola, who headed up our group, had managed to connect with several prostitutes in the brothels. You see, a number of years before, Alec had actually paid for time with a prostitute, and then a Christian girl he was with spent that purchased time talking to the prostitute about Jesus. She was impressed enough to invite them to visit her other friends who worked in one of the brothels. Over time, they'd become friends with the women in a number of the brothels, and so would visit them every Saturday night. Alec and Nola had become like their chaplains. Now it was getting close to Christmas, and Alec and Nola had purchased Christmas gifts for the women they were meeting with on that night. Alec said, "How about you and Barry come with us tonight?" I'd never been to a brothel before. I did not know what to expect. I remember the first one vividly. As soon as we knocked on the door, Alec and Nola were enthusiastically greeted. The door was closed to the customers for a short time. We were led into what seemed to be a normal suburban lounge room. A number of the women joined us. I was offered a seat, a cup of tea, and an iced Vovo biscuit, and wished happy Christmas. The women seemed overjoyed to receive the small gifts. One said,
"Oh, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to give this to my daughter. She loves these."
She has a daughter, I thought. In fact, the women I saw were not what I had imagined at all. I was 18, and most of them were much older than I. Some, I guessed, would have been my mother's age. Few looked like what Hollywood conditions you to expect. And they talked about a range of things, some very normal, like their kids' schooling, their partners not doing their share of the housework, and...
"Oh, Gough Whitlam's policies have been terrible for the economy. It's really slowed business, hasn't it, girls?"
Gough Whitlam had been the Prime Minister at the time. I couldn't believe we were talking politics. Barry suggested she might try another line of work, and they laughed.
"Being a checkout chick at Woolies doesn't pay as good as this line of work, darling."
We also heard of some of the problems of the business. The higher bribes being required from the police. The dangers of unruly customers. They spoke about what they did as if it was just a job. They also shared some of their heartaches, and at one point I was asked to pray. Afterwards, Alex said, "Make your prayer simple and short next time, okay?" Obviously the same problem I have with my videos. While there, we quickly shared the story and promise of Christmas, and then we left, because...
"If you're not paying, move on.
The process was repeated another 3 times before we left the cross to go back to our homes. I remember one of the women decided to follow Jesus. She even came to my church for a while. Alec took me aside and said, "Mike, don't mention her line of work to anyone. Christians often have trouble seeing past what a person has done and seeing the person that God considers precious enough to die for. As it turned out, I never went to the brothels again. Not long afterwards, Alec and Nola got married, and they got a job running a small church at Warilla in a town called Wollongong, and we disbanded as a small group that used to go to the cross. Prostitution is now legal. I think that's an improvement, though I wish it wasn't a viable industry. Its legalisation offers the sex workers involved greater protection, allows the community control over where they are located, and of course they benefit from the tax that's paid. Throughout the Bible, Jesus is recorded as showing kindness to the outcasts of his day, which included the prostitutes, the lepers, and the tax collectors. Jesus once said to the chief priests, the religious people of his day, "Truly, I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are entering the kingdom of heaven ahead of you." He said this because they were responding to his message, giving up their lifestyles, giving up their jobs, and following him. And they followed him because Jesus was able to see past what they did and see the person that he loved. Jesus sees you, and despite the things you may have done, he loves you and offers you forgiveness. And for those of us who have accepted his forgiveness, let's be like Jesus and show his love to everyone. Let's look past what they do and see the person. And I'll see you in the next video. God bless.